Learning how to use a knife is essential to learning how to cook in the kitchen properly, and learning about the knives is essential to using the knives properly. So today I will be teaching you how to use a knife without looking like this guy running in the background. This is me holding a sword because I'm cool. Not really. And I will be showing you all the basic knife skills and knives that you will need to become a beginner chef in any kitchen. Just as a side note, before I talk about different knives and their uses, it is important to understand that knives use different materials for the blade. You might see a stainless steel blade, which is probably the most common, like Walmart store blade. You'll see that and won't stain, obviously. And then there's also carbon steel blades, which are a harder metal, and they will do something called patina, which is basically like a controlled rusting, and it'll give your blade character. And there's also Damascus steel, which is a layered steel, which is the hardest of those three steels, and it will keep an edge longer. Starting with a cutting board, you can see I have washed my hands for food safety. Always wash your hands. We gotta check. Now, starting with the knives. First, starting with a yanagi knife, which is a Japanese sashimi knife used for cutting fish into thin slices. This is a stainless steel, and as you can see, it's single beveled. You cut using long strokes, and that's quite the simple knife, but not a lot of fish. This is a nakiri knife, which is a small vegetable cleaver. Not really a cleaver, but it works the same way. Also stainless steel. You cut using this by doing downward chops. Make sure to hold your knife properly like this, always pinching the blade with 2 fingers. This is your basic chef knife, which I will talk about later when I get to my second chef knife. This is called a santoku knife, which is a multi-purpose knife used for meat and fish. Essential for every kitchen. And this is also a Damascus steel knife. To cut using this, it's also downward cuts, but you can also do sort of chopping cuts moving forward. Very simple, nice to use, and very useful. This is a Chinese cleaver. Now, Chinese cleavers are used for more than just meat. It is also used for vegetables. And this type of cleaver is useful when you do downward cuts, and it's a very heavy knife, so it's good for getting straight through bones. You smack. This next knife is your common serrated knife or bread knife. Not all bread knives are the same as serrated knives, because bread knives are used for cutting bread, obviously, but serrated knives are useful for that. This is a Damascus knife, and you use it by slicing. Now, this type of knife is called a Kiritsuke, which is this is a German style knife but it has Japanese steel, and it's used for its bigger point. It's the same as a chef knife, where it's a multi-purpose knife for both meat and vegetables. Also very useful to have, and it looks cool. Now we're back to the common chef knife, which is probably the most used knife in any kitchen. It is useful for both meat and vegetables again. And it has a beautiful edge, and it's also, as you can see, curved, so you can do this rocking sort of motion, which is very easy to do and very safe. Now, getting into the small knives, first we have a common fillet knife. This is a Damascus steel knife, and it's used for doing long slices on fish or meat, cutting well, and it's very sharp. You usually put pressure with the top of your hand and slice with it, and it's also a very flexible knife, so you can get around bones and everything. This is a small santoku knife, so it's the same as a santoku knife, where it's multi-purpose, but it's just smaller for more control. Better for dicing small things like shallots and garlic. And last but not least, this is called a petty knife, which is basically just a small chef knife, where it's used for more small things to have better control, like peeling and stuff, but also a very, very good knife. This is an essential item in every kitchen. This is called a honing steel, which will basically help keep your edge sharper. It's not a sharpener, but it helps just keep the edge refined. Basically what you do is just do long strokes on it, both sides, depending on the type of bevel on your knife. And you don't want to do it too fast, because when you try to do it fast, you're going to smack the blade, which will just bend over the edge. So just long strokes using the entire steel, and that'll keep your edge nice and honed. This is me feeling very carefully to see if there's any sort of bevels on it. And then you just want to wipe off any pieces of metal that might have gone on it before you use it. Now we will be getting into basic knife safety and cutting techniques to make sure you don't chop off your fingers. Starting with some knife safety. Of course, first, always make sure you wash your hands, 30 seconds with soap, and you're good. Now, second, before you even start chopping, you want to make sure your cutting board is super secure. If it's not secure, put a wet paper towel underneath. It won't slide anywhere. This cutting board has some friction pads on it from just some regular rubber, so I didn't really need it, but just to show. Now, a knife. Always make sure this knife is very sharp. If it's not sharp enough to cut through a tomato like this, I wouldn't use it. That's the basic of knife sharpening. Tomato, perfect. If the tomato smushes, not good. Now, for some basic training, as you can see, the way I'm cutting, I'm keeping my fingers very far away from the blade. Not far away, but I'm using them almost to help leverage the blade. Keep it nice. As you can see, I can cut a nice thin slice of tomato like this. Now, just get rid of whatever's on your cutting board, because having a clean cutting board is another essential step. You don't want to clutter your cutting board, or it won't be good. Here's me wiping my knife just to keep it clean. Now, an onion. So the basic first step of cutting an onion. Now, when something's round, you want to make sure you get a good grip on it and just keep slice right through. Make sure your fingers aren't in the way. Tuck in your fingers. Use the blade on your knuckle as sort of a leverage. Now, make sure you're not holding it from the handle like this, because that is a no-go. Some people will hold it like that, which is kind of okay. It won't give you as much of a secure grip, but it'll be okay. Always pinch the blade with 2 fingers. Gives you a lot more control and just makes it easier, and you can also slice down better, and it doesn't tire you out as easily. Now, this is a perfect time to use our petty knife, since we're doing some peeling and just chopping off the ends. So, chop off the ends. Another key step, always have a bucket nearby for your scraps. That way you'll clutter your board less, and you will have just a clean board, and it'll be easier to clean up. Now, to peel something, just put your knife by it. Make sure your thumb isn't on the blade or going to hit the blade, and just use it to peel it off. Very easy. Same thing with this half of the onion. Just slice off the ends, put them in the scrap bucket. Make sure it's very clean, and then use your thumb and it to peel it very slowly. Make sure to have control. Control is key when you're using knives. Now, I don't really need this anymore. Always make sure your knife is clean before you put it anywhere, because having a dirty knife will actually will make it sort of be less sharp over time, and if you have a clean knife, it's just better for it. Now, there are some lines in the onion that will help you chop it. Now, we're going to be doing a medium chop today, a medium dice. So what you're doing is just small downward strokes, not going completely through the onion. Also making sure your thumb is out of the way, and you're always bending your fingertips so that one of your knuckles is always hitting the knife. And definitely not cutting like that, because that just looks totally wrong, and that's how you chop off fingernails. Just make sure it's nice and rested. Hit either your knuckle, just make sure your fingertips out of the way. Always make sure your fingertips are out of the way. Bunch up your fingers, hold your thumb and pinky back. Your thumb and pinky are holding the onion together right now. And just do some downward cuts. Do it slowly. Make sure you're in control. Keep cutting downward. Make sure you use the full onion. Just top these down again, using your thumb and pinky again to hold it. And just chopping straight down with your fingertips. Now move this onion out of the way so you have a nice clean area. Now for this onion, we'll be doing a fine chop. Again, you're using the lines as a sort of guide. And for this, you're doing much thinner cuts. So a lot more cuts and they're thinner to get a smaller dice. Now again, keeping your thumb and pinky out of the way and using your knuckle to guide the knife down to make sure you're not hitting any of your fingers. Some people like to cut the onion in half that way, not fully through, but there's kind of no point because it's already in layers. So now, again, using your pinky and thumb to hold it together because the edges want to fly out like a butterfly. Keep it together. Do it slowly. Keep in control. Very simple. Having a dull knife, you have to put a lot of force into this. So always have a sharp knife. Just going straight down. Then you're left with the end piece of the onion. Again, always use it. It's very simple. Having these basic knife skills, you will cut yourself a lot less. Just make sure to use the full onion, just doing a smaller version of what I did at the beginning. Just slicing straight down on this part. Get rid of any scrap pieces that I don't need because they're a bit over green. Just making sure to keep the tips of your fingers out of the way. Doing it slowly. Now again, clear your board. Make sure it's fully clean before you start cutting anything else, because if you're using a tiny part of a board, it is not good, because then you're more likely to slip or make mistakes, and making a mistake is what you want to do least in the kitchen. You can use these knives like this to sort of scoop up whatever's on your board. Just make sure you don't slice into your hand as you do it. Again, always keeping control. Just me wiping off my cutting board before I start using it, because having a clean board is essential. I also wipe off my knife here. Now we'll get into the carrot. Now, having a carrot like this, we're going to cut it julienne style, which is basically just small slices. So what you want to do, again, is cut off the tips, just because they're kind of gross. Feed those to a bunny if you have one. And now we have parts of the carrot which are in segments. Now carrots, since they sort of go down into different sizes, you want to cut it into the sizes that will cut better and be more uniform in size. So this small one is kind of way too thin to cut properly, so we're just going to get that out of the way. And we're going to use my Santoku knife for this, just to show a different method. Now, for this, it's kind of hard because rolling edge, and you want to be very careful with rolling edges because you'll end up cutting your finger. So I'm slicing down on the flat edge, just making a tiny square, tiny rectangular prism, so we can get the most uniform cuts. As you can see, we have just a perfect rectangular prism. Now what we'll do is cut that into slices again. Always making sure to keep your thumb and pinky out of the way, using your knuckle as a sort of guide for the knife. It's a very universal cutting method and very easy to do. Just make sure to go slowly and it'll be easy. Now we have these slices, and what we'll do to cut it julienne is cut the slices down again. Then we have these small little almost fingers of carrot that would be perfect for stir fries, soup because they cook quickly, and whatever else. It's a very useful piece to have. Again, just cutting straight down. You can stack them if you're feeling good about it, but just make sure to go slowly when you do it. You can go fast if you get more comfortable at it, and just keep all the pieces that you want to cook similar size. I'm going to use these end pieces. In a restaurant, they wouldn't want to use the end pieces normally because it just doesn't look as good unless you're making a soup or something. But here I am going to use the end pieces because why would I waste the good pieces of carrot? Or you can just eat them if you really want carrot. But again, always making sure you have good control and you have snacks on the way. And there you go. Very easy stuff to do. Very simple. If you follow these steps, always make sure to know which knife you're using in which situation. You should be able to chop pretty well without losing your fingers. So make sure to just practice. Go very slow and you'll get the hang of it in no time. Thanks for paying attention. Maybe. Or sleeping. Who knows?